I don't know how many people know about the history of Black history, but you have to understand the context in which Black history or African American history was developed. So one, divorcing African and African descended people from their history and culture was a part of the conquest, the domination, the process of domination. It was the soft glove violence of imperialism, colonialism, and hegemony. And so it had a name during slavery. It was called seasoning. Once the African demonstrated signs that they understood they were not to think of themselves as a full human with a history and a culture, then they could be properly enslaved, made chattel or movable property. So after chattel slavery was over, a part of underscoring this, reiterating this idea of subjugation involved telling African Americans, well, you don't have a history, so you're not a very civilized people, because civilized people have a history and you don't have one. What so what are you going to tell us? Our people captured your people from the jungle and civilized you and gave you Christianity and you're better for it. That's all we need to know. So in 1915, an African American man named Carter G. Woodson had a PhD from Harvard University, began to try and push back against this phenomenon by systematically studying African Americans' history, Negro history, as they would have called it at the time. And so he, saw that there needed to be certain mechanisms to systematically and scientifically study and document this people without a history's people, right? Or so-called people without a history. Um, you know, um, and people, you can go and look it up. Folks were saying, y'all don't have a history and culture that anybody is bound to care about or respect. So there shouldn't be any historical associations. There shouldn't be any books. There shouldn't be any courses on this. But Carter G. Woodson founded in 1915 the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. And as far as the history of Black history is concerned, that was the impetus, right? That was the germinating a seed for African American history. And so the group got together, they were formalized, they had dues, they had local groups and national groups that developed to systematically study and systematically teach what was being discovered and published about Black history. So they started an observance, yearly observance in the month of February, and that was important because it was the birthday month of several figures, key figures in Black history, like Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president, who was, responsible for initiating the Civil War that, as people would say, freed the slaves. And Frederick Douglass, a famous, formerly enslaved person who escaped from slavery, learned to read and write, and became this abolitionist, powerful abolitionist, helping to do away with slavery. So that was what they called Negro History Week, and that the first Negro History Week was celebrated in 1926. Negro History Week was officially recognized by an American president in 1976, so 50 years later. So these people in this organization, the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, worked in the trenches to disseminate this idea that there was a Black history that reached all the way back to Africa, that people should be concerned about, who should systematically study and teach for 50 years before it was, really officially recognized by the United States of America. And then it became a month-long observance in 1978. And around this same time, in this post-World War II era, the Black Power movement that I talked about earlier, one of the concrete gains that it made was to develop at the level of higher ed, the systematic study of Blackness, of Africanness, and of people of African descent, African Americans. So the field, the intellectual field of Black studies or African American studies and African studies, Africana studies, as it would come to be called eventually, developed. The first Black Studies department was started at San Francisco State University in 1968. So it's important to study Black history because it is seen as Black culture. Its culture and history is seen as a hallmark of a civilized people. And it's important. We shouldn't take it for granted that people see us as a people worthy of historical study, systematic study, funding, you know. So that's one reason why it's important, and then there are these other kind of, aphorisms, right? A people without a history is doomed to repeat, the worst parts of the past. So it's important to study history, to teach history, to learn history, so that we can not only see where we came from, but we can see where we're going, and we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. That's what I think. That's my quick answer.
Thank you so much. That's powerful. That's powerful. Now, another thing I'm going to ask you now, we are moving towards the end. Don't worry, we're not going to spend all the time here, no?
Okay.
Um, Now, you're a professor of history. You are you are connected in the university, which means you have a group of scholars now, which also means you have a lot of students who are looking up to you for reference. Now, for you, what is your own reference for African studies? By that, I mean, are you also, because you are talking of African study, a connection with some universities in Africa for reference? Do you have, do you need to use any books from Africa written by Africans to, or do you have to rely only on the book that are written by European or by other African diaspora about Africa? Help me understand that.
Oh, okay. I understand the question now. Yeah, yes, it's important to connect with scholars from the continent. And it was very important for me once I became a history major, to learn from other people, from the continent of Africa. So I had teachers and mentors from the continent of Africa. Um, and don't forget, I went to 2 historically Black colleges and universities. So what one of the first people who told us as a class, about these holdovers in African American vernacular English that were so influenced by continental culture, was a literature professor from the continent of Africa. At Spelman, study abroad was encouraged, and study abroad in Africa was encouraged if you were going to research African and African American history and culture and heritage. I unfortunately didn't have the funding to go to the continent when I was an undergrad, and my efforts to study at the continent, haven't on the continent haven't come to fruition just yet. But I thought at these HBCUs and even at the predominantly historically white institution, Georgia State University, I had some premium African continental scholars. So at Georgia State, it was Muhammad Hassan Ali, who was a wonderful scholar who taught history of the Horn of Africa and history of Southern Africa. Even when I went on exchange, I had a Nigerian professor in Jamaica, and we studied Kwame Nkrumah in his
Ghana.
writing from Ghana, right? And then we're always proud that he studied at an HBCU, Lincoln University, when he was here in the United States. We always talk about that. At Clark Atlanta University, I had Dr. I cannot remember his first name, Konde, Konde was his last name, from Cameroon. Emmanuel Konde, when that was for my master's program. And I even have some great colleagues who I'm always in contact with and talking with about a lot of concepts. Like we talk every week. Harry Osana Akko, also from Cameroon. It's a very, very important person in my intellectual life, in terms of talking with him about and learning from him about topics that are near and dear to my heart in terms of the continent of Africa. So no, I mean, I think it's very important. Yes, initially, like some of the first textbooks I had were E.A. Wallace Budge, and there's a green book, I cannot think of it, but it's a European scholar, and it was very important for us to move away from that paradigm.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
That is very important. It is very important also for the students that are studying history to understand the importance of connection. Because, like we have understood so far in your explanation, connection is very important. This is what the Europeans have been targeting so much, so that we don't connect. But now we can connect. We see that we can connect. So that the European who used to become the expert on African history, we need to take their job. They cannot become expert on African history. They should become expert on European history. The expert on African history must be Africans, whether the African diaspora or Africans at home. These are the only people that can teach African history. Because, like Dr. Ben was saying, history is not just dates, it's not just figures. There are emotions in it. A European cannot teach African history. So we need to pass the message on very well. And there are no lack of resources. Just like European universities, just like a lot of universities in the United States, we send students to come to Rome to study the Colosseum, take them to Egypt, take them to the war in Berlin, take them to Paris. I think they should also do the same. Send them to the Great Zimbabwe, to ancient Benin, take them to Nubia, to Sudan. I know, of course, it's not really their responsibility as it were, because if what they want is a people that they can dominate over, then of course they're not going to give them the instrument to liberate themselves. But at least there are a lot of powerful people in the community who can sponsor some of this project of research. Also, there are a lot of Africans that are coming from the continent. Some of them are very learned, who can be called upon. Hey, like for example, the professor I made mention of before, who is coming from Senegal, is a lecturer there also in US. So I'm not saying this to say that people that are in the diaspora, like maybe the African American, are not qualified. I'm saying that we need to connect. You teach me what you know, I teach you what I know. This way we will know more. So this is from the point of view I'm saying this. All right, now, how can people connect with you? I don't use this moment to advertise yourself shortly. Please go.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can follow me on Instagram at Kr Mccray Ph.D, on Twitter at Kr Mccray Ph.D. I have a website, Kenja Mccray, that's KenjaMccray.com, where you can see I listed my publications and articles about me, other podcasts. So if you go to my website, you'll see all of that. And then the hashtag is Black History Bucket List, all run together, all spelled out, BLACKHISTORY BUCKETLIST.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Of
Thank
course,
you.
people, they're definitely going to connect with you. I see an intelligent professor like this. Why not? They should need to connect. We are looking for the connection.
Oh,
All right.
yes.
Now, how do you think African diaspora or Africans in general, what do you think we should do to spread more positive stories about our history? Because this is very important.
Yeah, so I mean, what you were saying is very important. I talked about formal professors that I had. I talked about colleagues, but you're right. When you mentioned Dr. Ben's name, I was like, oh, I didn't even talk about or think about the informal ways that I learned history, like from a Dr. Ben by going to lectures, from a Theophile Obenga by going to lectures. So definitely attend lectures, and all those experts on African and African diaspora history and culture give lectures. Especially connect through libraries and through colleges, and get with professors who can bring their classes. And that's how I learned some of the best uh, 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 parts and pieces of, and most radical, right? Those that challenge the norm, those ideas from lectures. And nowadays, it's so much easier to connect because we have the internet, we have social media. So engage with your podcast like you're doing, and YouTube videos and things like that. It's just, you have to be careful about the source. It's always important to think critically, but there's so many ways that we can use, platforms, like I said, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, to tell about our history and our culture.
All right, perfect. That's good. We need to use the tools of the age and the tools that are available for us. So let's
Mhm.
use it correctly, intelligently, not just go there and waste. Because a lot of people go there to just waste time. They're looking for something to spend their time, but use it
Right,
to educate yourself, help yourself, because nobody's going to help us. We're going to have to help ourselves. All right, thank
right.
you so much. I really appreciate the time. Now, is there any other thing you would like to add to the conversation? Maybe a message to conclude it? I don't know. You can even do a shout out to your students. I don't know. Do whatever you like to conclude the conversation, just shortly.
Oh, yeah, okay. I like that idea of shouting out my students. And I do say hello to all my wonderful students at Georgia Tech. And then the students that I still keep in touch with and connect with, that I taught for more than a decade at Atlanta Metropolitan State College. That's where Dr. Akko is. And my future students at Clayton State University.
Thank you so much. I want to appreciate it again. I can't even thank you enough. I really appreciate the time that we spend here, and I've learned a lot. And of course, the learning is never going to finish. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, too. I enjoyed it. And you have a new listener to the
Thank you.
Obey podcast. Take care.